Okay, so sisters, allies, Labour, friends and family, we are really, really delighted to be hosting this event on parenting and politics. Can we have it all? Yes, we can tonight. We are aware that childcare is one of the biggest structural barriers women face in entering and advancing in any profession. But that has proved particularly true in the political sector over the years. And even though I was looking through the list of the shadow cabinet today, thinking, actually, I think quite a lot of current people at the top of the party do have school age or younger or older children themselves at the moment. And it is, in fact, a huge percentage of our current top team have these juggles to contend with themselves and survive. So we really do believe at LWN, even though this is obviously one of the most material things that presents challenges in accessing our democracy and in playing a full part in public life, that it is doable, and that women in particular and parents and carers in general should not be deterred if they feel a vocation to represent the people from doing so just because they also have caring responsibilities. Labour Women's Network has done a lot of work in this area over the years. In particular, we're really proud to have worked closely with the local government association to deliver some really watertight, legally binding policies and model motions on parental leave policies for councillors, because when we started looking at this issue back in, I think, 2017, only 4 councils in the UK had any kind of formalised policy for maternity, paternity, adoption leave arrangements for councillors. One of the last sort of jobs, as it were, in the world in which, or in the UK, in which there was no formal right to any parental leave at all. And now, having worked on those policies and with brilliant members, some of whom are on the call tonight, having worked hard to push them through their own Labour groups and their own Labour councils, I know that figures up to 40-something local authorities have those policies in place now. So we are making progress. There's been progress in the House as well with proxy voting, etc. And yet, a Labour Women's Network trains about 400 women every year, and we do see for ourselves firsthand that when that crunch moment comes on whether to stand, whether to stand for parliamentary selection or whether to stand, whether to push yourself to be the council leader if you are already a council, it is often, how on earth am I going to make this work around the kids, that is the reason that makes someone sort of self-deselect from taking that further step. So we wanted to, well, and there's loads of scare stories in the press about how impossible it all is, and sometimes quite a lot of negative noises. So what we wanted to do tonight was to welcome people to a really positive conversation around the ways we can make it work, and how to embrace the challenges of balancing kids and constituents. So I am absolutely delighted to have 2 of my really favourite women from the Labour movement here tonight. We've just had such a fantastic International Women's Day/week/month and Women's History Month, in which we've been absolutely spoiled with some fabulous guests and some really frank and uplifting conversations. But tonight I'm really, really pleased to be welcoming Ellie Reeves MP tonight, who I have known for a long time, since our student politics days, and who has always been refreshingly honest, refreshingly upbeat, and a great champion for women and for working class people. Ellie is, of course, a Member of Parliament for Lewisham West and Penge and was elected in 2017. She's currently serving as the Shadow Minister for Prisons and Probation, having previously been the Shadow Solicitor General, and in both those roles has been doing some brilliant work to challenge the Tories' terrible record on rape convictions, and that's a campaigning line I really admire in Ellie. She was previously spent many years as a trade union employment lawyer, and of course serving as an NEC member at the heart of the Labour Party, before when she had her own first child, actually setting up a women's rights legal advocacy line for women at work. So perhaps we'll touch on that later on as well. And Ellie will be interviewed tonight by LWN's legendary Councillor Sharon Thompson. Sharon is a cabinet member in Birmingham City Council, which is actually the biggest local authority in the whole of Europe. And we're really proud that she's a graduate of the Jo Cox Women in Leadership scheme, and also a member of the Labour Women's Network National Executive Committee. Sharon is an expert in housing and ending homelessness, and herself has lived experience of having been homeless as a teenager, and was a single mum in her late teens, and obviously now mum to an adult son. So has done a long stretch in local government whilst juggling a teenager and now a young adult. And Ellie, of course, has two young boys herself. I think one preschool, Ellie, and one school age.
Yeah, 8 and 3.
Oh, one of whom appeared right in the middle of a general election, if I remember right.
Not very well timed.
So both of them have very hands-on lived experiences of how this juggle works in reality. So I am really, really delighted to listen to the conversation between them tonight, and then we'll be opening it up to questions later on. So if you have any questions, do either pop them in the comments or raise your hand when the time comes. We'll also be bringing in some contributions from councillors as well to hear how it's working for you in local government. But if you want to tweet about tonight's event, you can do so. We are at Labour Women's Net, at Ellie Reeves, at Ms_S Thompson, and the hashtag for tonight is #HavingItAll. So without further ado, and can I just say that both Ellie and Sharon have had really quite tense and packed diaries this week. I know that Ellie's just got off a train back from accompanying Cllr to his big speech in Stoke, having done early morning media rounds this morning, and that Sharon has just squeezed in, having been tackling that really difficult incident in her ward in Birmingham throughout the week. So big love to you both for squeezing in a slice of sisterhood at the end of a really packed week, and over to you.
Thank you very much, and no better place to be after a very long week than with a bunch of sisters from the Labour movement. So thank you very much for having us. Cllr, this is going to be me and Ellie's therapy after a long week, I think. So thank you. And Ellie, I'm absolutely thrilled to be speaking to you tonight. I've been looking forward to this all week, and I think it's such an important topic, especially for us mums across the political space. I know I remember when you first got sworn in, actually, in as a member of Parliament. You was there with baby in tow, yeah. And it was such. For many of us, we looked at that and thought, "Yes, rock on, sister." But you know, as someone that's inside Parliament, how child friendly is it really being a member of Parliament within that space?
Well, I think a lot has changed in recent years. And can I also just start by saying how pleased I am to be here tonight with you, Sharon, Cllr, and everyone, and Jane and everyone else that's here this evening. I always find these, it has been a long day, it's been a long week, but I always find these sorts of events, being around sisters within the Labour Party, being really, really uplifting and enlivening. So I'm really pleased to be here this evening. And to talk about what is such an issue so close to my heart. Sharon, you asked about you know, what you know, whether it is a sort of family sort of friendly place, whether what it is like to have some kids. A lot has changed, a huge amount has changed, and so I put myself forward for Parliament in 2017 when Theresa May called that snap election. It wasn't something that I had been planning to do. It wasn't on my radar. I'd just set up my own legal consultancy. My husband's also an MP. That adds an extra complication to everything. But it wasn't my intention to sort of go for Parliament. But the circumstances of that snap election, my local MP said he was retiring. It's the seat where I lived, where I'd grown up, where I was bringing up my family, and those opportunities don't come around very long. But I agonised over it. I absolutely agonised over it. I had this kind of 24 hours where I had to make a decision about whether to put myself forward or not. And in the end, the thing that made me think I could put myself forward was the fact that there is an on-site nursery in Parliament. That's quite a recent thing. I think it had been there a couple of years. Claire, you probably know better than me because all three of your children, three youngest children, all went there. But the existence of that nursery meant that I felt able to put myself forward, because I knew that I would be able to take my, he's my eldest now, but he had just turned 2 at the time. I knew I'd be able to take him into Parliament, leave him at the nursery, pick him up, take him to go and vote, because that's a change as well. Until a couple of years, maybe a year before I was elected, you couldn't take your child through the voting lobbies, and we tend to vote at sort of 7 o'clock at night, sometimes 10 o'clock. But you can now take your baby through the voting lobby. And those things made me feel as though I could put myself forward. And actually, it's women that went before me that campaigned for change. Harriet Harman, for example, lobbied hard to get that nursery. It was originally a bar, because we don't have enough bars in Parliament, and there was quite a considerable resistance from certain quarters about turning that bar into a nursery. But the fact that it had been turned into a nursery meant that I could put myself forward, and I think that is a big shift in Parliament. So you always see sort of kids now. My office is just above where the nursery is, and you always see the kids sort of coming in and out, and it's absolutely lovely. I think that adds to making it feel like it is certainly far more family friendly than it used to be.
I think that'll be really reassuring to hear from many sisters thinking about putting themselves forward. And it's good to hear that dynamic. I have walked past the nursery and I thought, oh, I didn't expect to see this here.
And it's lovely. It's a brilliant nursery. It's absolutely, like, my son he still talks about it now. He goes, oh, I went to nursery school in Parliament, and he just absolutely loves it. It was a brilliant experience for him as well.
Oh, that's really, really good. And I guess the external perception of women who have children that are in politics and also in Parliament, at the moment, it almost feels that there's like a negativity that's around it and people's perceptions. And obviously, it sounds like you've had quite a good experience. And having read Harriet's book, you can see how much the distance has travelled in that space considerably. Do you find that the commitments are at odds, or does it feel that it kind of flowed quite well, being a parent and then also being a...
It is a juggle. It is a juggle. But you talked about sort of Harriet, and when Harriet was elected, I think the sitting hours in Parliament was that there were votes at 10 o'clock at night on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. I mean, how Harriet managed that is just, or any woman with children managed that, I think it's incredibly tough. And it was people like Harriet that sort of led the way in changing the sitting hours in Parliament. And it was only just over 10 years ago that that we moved to, it was before I was an MP, to just having the one late night, the 10 o'clock vote on a Monday. I think that could do with further reform, frankly. But you've got the 10 o'clock vote on the Monday, and then 7 o'clock votes on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then 5 o'clock on a Thursday, though we don't tend to vote on Thursdays. So normally it should be Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays for your voting. And it can be a juggle, particularly when the vote runs later than, say, 10 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and that can be quite unpredictable. So next week, for example, every vote that we've got is on what's called protected time, which means it could go on later than 10 o'clock, it could go on later than 7 o'clock, but you don't know how much later it could go on for, which makes it incredibly difficult when organising childcare. That does make it a juggle. That doesn't happen all that often anymore. That is the exception now rather than the norm, which is really helpful. But there is that kind of juggle that you always have to sort of have, working out when the votes will be, and making sure childcare is arranged around it. But there are a lot of people in Parliament that have got young children, and I think that sort of helps to change the culture of the place as well. Claire, you mentioned at the beginning about many of the shadow cabinet having young children, and you're right, they have. And I do think there's been a bit of a sort of that kind of cultural shift as more and more people going into Parliament from both sides of the house actually, that have got young children.
I think that's good to hear, the culture shift, because as a councillor in Birmingham, I remember when a newer councillor joined, she was just got elected in a by-election. We'd never had a culture of having children coming into the chamber unless it was a Labour group meeting. And here she walked in with her sling, and she handed the baby to the former leader of the council so she'd go up and do a speech, and it was like, oh my gosh. And it was a real culture shock for them, but it was really warm. But it was also good knowing that she just thought it was normal. They were like, oh, this is different, but she thought it was normal. So for sisters that are sort of being selected now to stand, and are thinking about, you know, what if I do get elected, and hopefully we will, so we have that Labour government. But what's the top 3 things that you would give them? What advice would you give them?
That anything is possible, that you can juggle being an MP with being a mum as well. I don't think you have to make a choice between, you know, whether you're there for your kids or whether you're going into Parliament. You just got to get into a routine and a rhythm. I think that's really important, is getting into that sort of that routine. Set boundaries. You know, an MP's work is never done. There's always more things that you can do. You know, you'll be asked to go to a million different events in Parliament, in the constituency, and it's really important that you set those boundaries. You don't have to go to absolutely everything. You don't have to go to absolutely everything that you're invited to. You can prioritise the things that are most important, so you can still make sure that you've got that family time as well. I'm quite strict with my Sundays, for example. That's family day, and I'm really strict about, you know, not agreeing to do things on Sundays. On Saturdays, you know, I try and find things in the constituency that I can take the kids to. You know, if there's a community fair or a fete, then, you know, the kids are normally quite keen to go along, which is nice. But making sure that, you know, you do set those boundaries and you do have that time for family as well. And, you know, the other thing is just making sure that you get the childcare that's right for you, whether that's the on-site nursery or some other form of childcare, but just making sure you've got the right, you know, the right sort of model for you and your family, because there isn't sort of one size fits all. The reality is that the hours can be a bit irregular, and the good thing about having the nursery on site is that it's literally there, so your children are there, but there are other options as well. But I think just sort of getting into to a good routine with that's really important.
That's really good, and I think that's really sound advice. Boundaries, I think, on anybody that's been on Labour Women's Network training, boundaries and self-care are probably 2 things that are top of the agenda, and it's not a bad thing on occasion to say no.
Yeah It's hard. I mean, it is hard, and I think sometimes, you know, as women, we feel like we have to prove ourselves and sort of, you know, yes, I'll go to this, yes, I'll go to that, but actually, you know, the reality is that you can prioritize things, you can. And I think, you know, sort of looking at, you're right about being the sort of self-care and looking after yourself, and not necessarily doesn't make you a worse MP because you haven't gone to an event where there's 2 people in a room. You know, it's just about working out the things that you need to be at, because there are some things that you do really need to be at, and the things that you know, perhaps could be, you know, left to someone else on that occasion, so that you can be with your kids or you can be taking care of yourself.
That's really refreshing to hear. And I guess, and having been in local government, I know that the sisters, we always give each other advice and we listen to each other, and, you know, all of that stuff, and, you know, have those bad days where you're the person that you phone and stuff. And I know that with being an MP, if you're in a London constituency, it's probably a lot easier geographically in terms of managing, taking kids to school, the school run and everything else that comes with that. And I guess some of those that are non-London based, there's always a question about, you know, how do they sometimes manage, and particularly if they're parents, the family commitments. What's the general advice that goes on in the sisterly chat around that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm a London MP, so, you know, I'm not dividing my time between 2 places. You know, I come back to the family home after the votes. I'm here in the mornings. Different people do different things. So there's a lot of MPs there's a lot of female MPs and male MPs as well that have constituencies outside of London. but their children are in school in London, so that they're there in the week, and then they might go to the constituency up in the weekends, in the recesses, for example. Others do it the other way around. Their kids are in the constituency and they come down to London for a few days. They come down normally on a Monday morning. Depending on where in the country you are, you can often get back after the vote on a Wednesday. So a lot of people do go back after the Wednesday vote to their constituency if they can get back, so that they're there on Thursday mornings. But there isn't really a sort of one size fits all model for that. It goes back to what I said before. Every family is different, and different things work. Different things work better for different people. But there is a real mixture about where people send their children to school, where they're based during the week, and I think it depends on what works. But the point you were also saying about how we support each other, there is, I think, a really strong support network amongst female MPs, and that's something that I've always really welcomed. I mean, all of my kind of close MP friends are women. I'm really lucky because my sister's also an MP, so that's incredibly helpful. And our kids are similar ages, so we spend a huge amount of time together. Just at weekends chatting and with the kids playing, and that's great. But more broadly than that, there is a lot of us that have got those young kids, and I think we do support each other. Talk about some of the issues, the concerns, how the kids are getting on, and those sorts of things. And that network's there. We've got a strong women's parliamentary Labour Party, but also we just sit and have a cup of tea in the tea room and a little bit of a chat, and often a little bit of a moan if we're there quite late and we're all sort of thinking we just want to go home. But it's nice. There is that sort of sisterly solidarity, which I certainly really welcome.
I think that's really positive, that there is that kind of sort of atmosphere in there, and kind of friendliness.
Yes,
everybody understands what it's like, how difficult it is juggling things and parenting at the same time. So I think that's really good to hear. And from the answers that you've given me so far, I'm sort of picking up the picture that really one size doesn't fit all, and that actually in any role like this, that we really need to make it work for ourselves, so fit it in around our own life commitments in a way that works.
Yeah, absolutely, because there is different people have different levels of help from family, for example. For example, I don't really get much childcare from my family, so we have to have, because my husband and I are both in Parliament, it's not like if I'm voting at 10 o'clock at night, my husband can be at home with the children, because we're both voting at 10 o'clock at night. So we have someone that comes and looks after our children on those days, Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So we've got someone in our house when we're voting late, but other people might have family members that are more willing to do that. I remember after the 2017 general election, there were quite a few MPs that weren't necessarily expected to get elected, and there were quite a few single mums amongst them. And I think there are quite a lot of grandmas ending up doing quite a lot of childcare they weren't necessarily expecting to do, for example. And so different people find themselves in different positions. As I say, I don't have sort of family that are sort of able to do that sort of wraparound childcare. So a different model works for me. And the nursery in Parliament, you can get extended sessions in there as well to cover the votes, which I used a few times when my son was there. So again, it's about sort of working out what sort of works.
What works best.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of, because I know when I was first elected in 2014, I was a single mum. I am a single mum. Well, he's an adult now, and my son was sort of, I think he was a teenager, so he was getting ready for his exams at school, and I had that sort of almost burn of, oh my gosh, I should be at home, but at the same time he was like, no mum, do you want me to stuff envelopes? What do you want me to do? And I'll be phoning him like, are you okay? And he's like, I've just put the washing machine on, mum, I hope I haven't run anything. But it was kind of like, they're really proud of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But also just sort of, not making yourself feel guilty by what social norms said should be, but actually making it work and making it fun, actually, and enjoying doing and taking them on that journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, like, if I was to ask my son, you know, my 8-year-old, whether he thinks he sees enough of me, he certainly thinks he sees enough of me. You know, there isn't this sense of, you know, I don't feel like I'm sort of not around, for example. And one of the things about the job is that there is a bit of kind of flexibility around it. So, for example, I mean, look, I think there are some issues about how late things go on into the evenings, particularly that Monday 10 o'clock vote. But, you know, in the mornings, Parliament doesn't get going until sort of mid-morning. So when I take my kids to school, which is brilliant, is I really, you know, I take my little one to preschool and I take my older one to school, or my husband does, but every day one of us is able to do that. We're not there though on those 3 nights in the evenings. Zoom's helped a lot because I've put my youngest to bed. I've given the 8-year-old a kiss, which he objected to, and and then I've come out here and done this meeting, so I haven't missed sort of that bedtime, for example. But it is about, you know, there is that sort of flexibility of, in the mornings I'm around. If there's a school play or a concert in the morning, I'm able to go to it. I had parents' evening. I managed to get back from Stoke. Thankfully, the Avanti trains were running, so I was able to go to my son's parents' evening before coming back home. So that was good. So there is that kind of, there is some flexibility. And the other thing is the parliamentary recesses tend to correspond, not all the time, but most of the time, with the school holidays. So during the school holidays, it's not that you don't work during the recess because you've got all the constituency stuff, but it's a different pace. It is a much, much different pace to when Parliament is sitting. When Parliament is sitting, it is pretty intense, particularly that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But, you know, during recess, which coincides with the school holiday, we're not sort of thinking, oh, what club are we going to have to put kids into for the whole holiday? We can normally juggle things really quite well, and that's important. That's sort of juggling it, so we're not necessarily around as much as we would want to be during the week, but during the recess we're around an awful lot, which is, you know, that sort of balance to be had.
Okay, and I guess do you? I know for me, like, when at the beginning of the year, being in cabinet, it can be quite manic, and in January, the first thing that Nikki says to me, who manages my diary, is, let's plot in your leave for the year, Sharon. How much do you manage to do that to make sure that you get that kind of family holiday time and everything else that?
Yeah. I'm actually really strict about making sure that we do have those family holidays plotted in so that we are together. I find it really difficult to switch off if I'm at home, particularly because, you know, we live in the constituency. You never quite switch off. There's always the temptation just to do a bit of work or go to a meeting or whatever. So actually taking the time to sort of, we're going to Wales at Easter, for example, just to make sure we're sort of sometimes sort of physically removed from sort of the constituency, from what's happening in politics. It can be quite important. I'm not always that good at not checking my emails whilst I'm away, but I do try. That's something that I'm working on. But that is really important, I think, sort of finding that time. One of the things about being an MP is there is no, there's no sort of set sort of timetable about what you're supposed to do. It's not like you've got like a holiday allowance or anything like that. The hours are just, it just doesn't work like that. I can remember the summer before last when Kabul fell, and people were trying to get out of Afghanistan, and I've got a large Afghan population in my constituency, and it was the August. I thought it was going to be really quiet because August is normally really, really quiet, and in the end we ended up not going away because there was just so much to do. It was horrific. It's probably the worst thing I've sort of had to deal with since becoming an MP. I had citizens, I had constituents stuck over in Kabul, for example. So, we rearranged things that summer, and things like that do sometimes happen. There are some things you just can't plan for and predict. But by and large, you can make that time. That was sort of the exception rather than what normally happens. Yeah.
One of the questions I can see, because I'm just trying to keep an eye on what's happening in the chat, and it's one that does get asked a lot, is especially if you're a constituency MP, so everybody knows you're part of the fabric, how do you manage to strike that balance of keeping your children out of the spotlight? Because I know we all take our kids to the fetes and all the great things that happen in the local community, but when it comes to that kind of spot press, how do you manage to balance that?
Yeah, I mean, I try to make sure the kids sort of have a kind of as normal, sort of time as possible. Again, I just don't think there's one particular model. It's sort of what works best for you. I personally don't have my kids on any pictures or on any of my sort of social media, but other people might decide that they're more comfortable with that. And I think it depends what's right for you. My kids are relatively young at the moment. I think it becomes a bit harder as they get older. The boundary changes that are coming through means that we will end up living just outside of the constituency when the boundaries go through, and so it means most kids won't be at school in the constituency. And at first I was really upset about that. I was like, I can't believe I'm not going to live in my constituency anymore, and the school that they go to maybe. And then when I actually thought about it, I thought, you know what, I think there's actually some merit in them not going to school in the constituency and living, literally it's not like it was sort of like a mile from the constituency border. But actually, as they get older, I think for us as a family, that will probably work better. But again, it sort of depends. It depends what works best for you as a family, and I don't think there is a one size fits all.
Okay. And I guess because you are a part of the fabric and everybody knows you in the area, it probably they just, I guess for them, they're just like, there's Ellie.
Yeah. I mean, there is sort of, there is an element of that. What I find is at the moment I end up kind of picking up quite a lot of casework at the school gates. I often find that I'm doing casework for the school mums and things like that. And that sometimes again can be a little bit difficult with the sort of the boundaries, because they've all got my phone number because we're on the class WhatsApp or whatever, and then it sort of becomes a bit kind of, I tend to get more emotionally involved with those cases. For example, it's harder to sort of have that kind of emotional distance when you might know when you know their children and everything else, and their situation. So yeah, that can sometimes be quite tough.
Okay. So that's the school gates is always the one, isn't it, where
you must find that as a councillor as well, Sharon.
Absolutely, I do. Well, yes, when I used to, not as much because my son was at secondary school when I got elected, but sometimes when I'm in my ward, absolutely. And the way that people contact you is completely differently now compared to when I first got elected, especially post-COVID. It's just like another world, really. And the expectations. My son's in his 20s, and I remember when we was at, he's now at the point where when he works, he'll say, God, everybody knows you, don't they? Or I think when he was at college, he came back in, he said to me, Mum, Black History Month, I walked into the canteen and there's this display, and my God, you was on the picture. And I was like, did you say that's Mum? No. No. but he's, he's okay with it because he's sort of grown through the journey with me. So, he finds that particularly fine. So I think you're right. The balance is different for different people, and it just depends on how your family's set, really.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Although, like you have, you know, like my 8-year-old. I mean, my 3-year-old's oblivious to it all. He doesn't know. But my 8-year-old, he is, you know, increasingly aware about me and my husband being an MP, and he's really proud. At the moment, he's like super proud of it. He's just like, you know, my mum's an MP. I was like, yeah, that's great. Not everyone likes MPs though, Albert. So you don't necessarily want to tell everyone. And what do you mean? What do you mean not everyone likes MPs? What do you mean? What do you mean? And you know, it sort of doesn't always sort of, you know, it's lovely. It's lovely that he wants to tell everyone, but it's also
wait till you're 15, mate.
Imagine in a few years' time, he'd be like, I'm so embarrassed of your job, Mum.
Someone's like, oh, Mum, stop, have to. Yeah, that can be quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that Labour Women's Network is particularly proud of is that we've worked with the LGA to pull together sort of some work around parental leave and policies for those in local government, because, you know, there was nothing there for us previously.
I know.
Maternity leave, carers leave. So, and we think that, you know, there's over 40 local authorities that have rolled that out. So we feel that we've come a long way. What is the culture the same in Parliament? What is it that you think we still need to kind of be pushing the door? Where is it that we still need to be pushing and saying, actually, we need change here because we need to make it more inclusive and easier?
Yeah. Well, we only got proxy voting introduced for people that have babies. So before, when was it introduced? It was the beginning of 2019. So it wasn't until the beginning of 2019 that there was any form of maternity leave for MPs. And beginning of 2019, proxy voting came in. So if a woman has a baby, if they adopt, they have for 6 months, someone can vote on their behalf in Parliament. So prior to that, it was just this informal pairing system. So you'd effectively be marked as absent, but a Tory would also not vote, so you would cancel each other out. But it was all sort of behind closed doors, and you know, constituents looking at it would just think that you weren't there because your vote hasn't been cast. It's quite complicated to explain the pairing system, really. If someone's just checking to see your voting record or on something, it just looks like you're absent. And if it's an important vote, I think it's important that your vote is recorded. And so proxy voting was introduced. And actually, that was one of the things that made me think I could have a second child, because I did think that would be quite difficult to juggle having 2 children with me and my husband both being MPs. That would have been quite complicated if we both had to be there at 10 o'clock at night with a 3-month-old baby, for example. So that was really, really important. One of the things about proxy voting, though, is that it is only for 6 months, and that doesn't necessarily, we got a bit of a change. You now get a period before the baby's born as well, which is good. So it's just over 6 months, but that doesn't reflect maternity leave in the wider world of work, where you can get up to 12 months. And I really pushed back actually on this, sort of submitted to all the reviews on proxy voting, and said, look, you know, there's lots of people that will be very happy to come back after 6 months, but there may also be people that are less happy to come back after 6 months. For me personally, after I had my second child, I didn't want to be in Parliament for 9 or 10 months. About 10 months I wanted to be away from Parliament, but what I wanted to do is get back to some constituency work, just a day and a half a week from when he was 3 months, and that was what I felt would have suited me. But the proxy voting system meant that I only had that 6 months away from Parliament. And I do think that should change. And that's something that I'll continue to campaign on, to get that proxy voting period extended. Whether people want to take advantage of it or not, that will be up to them. But I think to give people the option is really important. I don't think there's I remember my first child, he wasn't a very good sleeper. And the idea of sort of working kind of at 10 o'clock at night with him would have been a bit of a nightmare. My second actually was a lot easier, so it would have been far more manageable. In the end, COVID sort of meant that no one was voting in Parliament anyway. But I do think that needs changing. And I also said about these sort of late night votes, that could be looked at. I mean, voting at sort of 10 o'clock on a Monday evening does seem, you know, quite outdated, and particularly when the votes sometimes can go beyond 10 o'clock at night as well, like they're going to this week. It makes it really hard, makes it really, really hard. And I do think that can be looked at, make it a lot easier for people, I think. Okay,
so it's definitely about extending the voting and cutting down, so it's not at 10 o'clock. It's actually 10 o'clock. When you get to that point, you're like, at 10 o'clock, I just don't even want to talk to people, let alone.
No, I know. I mean, 10 o'clock means not getting home until 11, and then not being able to get to sleep straight away. And then, you know, the kids don't know that you've been out late at work. So they're still up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And so that's, you know, so then all of Tuesday, you're just exhausted. So it's not a good way to be doing politics. The other thing is if we have multiple votes, so if we're voting on some legislation, there's different amendments we've got to vote on, we just do them one after another, and each vote takes about 15 minutes to do. So if you've got 8 votes, that's 2 hours of voting. So say you've got 8 votes at 10 o'clock at night, that means you're voting until midnight. Which is just madness. We've got, one of the things I sort of campaigned for quite a long time was being able to vote sort of using your pass to vote. So what previously happened, you had to give your name to a teller. Now you can use your pass to register your vote. This is a COVID thing, but they've still, so now you can just use your parliamentary pass, put it on a card reader, and that registers your vote.
That's make it quicker.
But there must be a way to be able to register your votes all at once. You know, I mean, I can appreciate if how you vote on one thing might depend on the outcome of the previous one, but that's really the case. They're normally standalone amendments. So you should be able just to go, you know, I'm sure the tech wouldn't be that difficult to be able to register like 8 votes all in one go. So you're not just walking around in circles. It's absolutely just crazy. You have like 650 MPs spending 2 hours just walking round and round the voting lobbies. It's really, really outdated.
Sounds outdated and frustrating.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's not like that in local government, if I'm honest with you. Yeah, voting system, it's a lot more quicker by the sounds of things.
What do you do? Do you vote at sort of the end of the session, or?
Yeah, so once you get towards the end, the chair will say we're voting on this, and you have to just press the buttons in the chamber.
Yeah.
It tallies up, and then it just comes up on the screen.
It just happens quickly. Yeah.
Really quickly. Just like that. Just like that. So Ellie, I could chat to you for absolutely ever and a day, but the sisters, I know they're going to be like, come on, I want to ask some questions. So I'm going to open up, and I know there's been some questions in the chat, but I don't know if sisters, if you put your hand up if you want to ask a question. I think a good start is for me to be able to see the screen.
Sharon, we've loads of questions in the chat, and I have made a note of them all, but there's so many. I wonder if we just want to ask people to put the raised hand up.
Yeah, I think so. Raised hand.
Then I can wash up any that people would prefer to just have us read out. I think also we were just going to nip to Erin Parker-Leonard, who's another one of our fabulous Joe Cox Women in Leadership graduates, for a bit of experience from the local government side with tiny babies as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Hello.
Hiya, Sharon. I will be very quick because I know people will want to ask questions as well. I just wanted to give a little bit of my little ones just came in, sorry, just wouldn't go to sleep on time. She did last night, but not tonight. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of local authority, my experience. Ellie, I just wanted to say as well, I think a woman making a speech is really powerful, but a woman making a speech wearing a baby is 100 times more powerful. I think I do a little skip every time I see that, actually a little skip. So yeah, thanks for having us. I will be quick. So since I was elected 4 years ago, I have been working really hard to make changes for local authority. within the local authority to make sure it was more baby friendly. So I had my first baby when I was elected. Actually, she was 6 months old when I was elected. After that, I got the Labour Women's Network baby leave motion passed. Then being the ever helpful and hardworking councillor, me and my wife got pregnant again so I could test it out. Since we've done that, I've been able to sort of look at practical changes and ways we can sort of ensure that it's, you know, the policy's there, but what are the procedures like? How can we practically make that difference? So obviously we all know that we need parents' voices. They are the voices of our young children, so it's so important that we have them. You know, in 4 years' time, I'll be on to a different stage in my children's lives, so it's important to catch those experiences in real time. And you know, I'm really keen to hear from other women who are experiencing being a councillor or being in politics with young children. Some of the positives, because I know it was, you know, the point of tonight was to look at the positives. It can be a flexible role. Some councillors do have expenses for childcare. As I think has been mentioned, it's setting an example for your kids. It's opened doors. I've been able to access training with my baby through the LGA and LWN. So I've been able to bring my baby along with my mum and my wife as well to look after the baby. So again, that's a massive positive. Practical, I think it's really important to look at the practical changes you can make. So the broom cupboard that was at the council offices was turned back into a baby feeding room again, instead of being used for you know, all the storage. I got parent and child parking spaces. I made sure that there was more buggy boot camp provision for parents, and of course influencing policy. So the baby leave motion, as I've mentioned, but also the really sad case of our Ishak. And when I took my daughter to her 1 year check, I didn't get asked if I had mould in my house, but I got asked a whole load of other questions about blinds and cords and things like that. And so I made sure that now all health visitors and at that 1 year check, that question is now going to be asked. The chief executive just changed the time of our count, so I'm up for election this year, and it's usually run straight along into the night. Sunderland are usually the quickest. We're North Tyneside. We never tried to compete, but we still did it during the night into the small hours. But now it's going to be the next day. Loads of people aren't happy with that, but I made sure I shouted about it and said, you know, accessibility and things like that. So I actually will be able to go to my own count now. You know, breastfeeding parents, you just couldn't do it. So again, compassion and seeing things from a parent's point of view is so important. Connecting with other parents, going to the parent sessions and taking your kids to the toddler sessions. You hear from people and you hear, you know, you have that connection, don't you, because you're going through the similar things. Just to paraphrase Tamina Ali, who is a local spoken poet, us mums know the importance of holding the mother when everyone else just wants to hold the baby. So again, having that point of view from a counsellor who then is able to take it further is so important. But again, there are lots of negatives, and I don't want to go through loads of negatives, but for me, what needs to improve my little mission locally is to just have better procedures, so not just for policy, but for Labour Group and the local authority to have procedures step by step to show exactly how things should be done. So the baby leave policy is great, but we need to have solid examples and procedures. I would love to have a better idea of how many parents we do have in the role of counsellor, and a way of collecting those really important lived experience as they're happening, because that's so important. Baby brain is totally real. We will forget all of these things. And then also for chief whips within Labour groups to have a special responsibility allowance. It's such an important role. And what I found was my Labour group was silent while I was on baby leave. I came back, I didn't get welcomed back. For all they knew, I hadn't had a baby until I turned up with her and breastfed her in front of them all. But yeah, so it was really important for me that, and it's a postcode lottery as to what your Labour group is like. But if the chief whips who are supposed to have that HR type role, they need to be not just a volunteer, they need to have a real important position. Better guidance for women Labour Party members to make informed choices before, but also then once they've been nudged and suddenly become a councillor, to know what to expect. And then a clear message from national and regional Labour to help local authorities to change culture, because I think that's ultimately what it is. It's always difficult to change culture, but that message needs to come. We all know we need more parents in politics. I think it's possible. I'm going to do as much as I can locally to do that. So yeah, we just need to work together to do that. And thank you very much for putting on this event tonight and putting it out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Erin. I think you can see people are clapping around the screen there. And that was brilliant. And actually, that just really summarised why it is so important to have more women in local government and also in Parliament, not just making it easier for women to get into politics, but also when you are in there, challenging different policies so that we can try and be more child-friendly, family-friendly, local areas. So I think that's really important. And I really like the fact that you said about actually making sure there's proper procedures and it's in writing. You know, who you whip is shouldn't change how you are treated in politics. So I think that's really important. So thank you very much for your contribution. That was great. I think we've got one question. I can see a hand up. Is it Cllr?
Yes, Cllr. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for putting on this event. It came at just the right time for me. I recently got selected, I think about a month ago in Bolton North East. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, and I have a 10-month-old baby. So I, as you can probably see from the chat, have loads and loads of questions around this, because I know I want to go on to have more kids as well. So and the sort of chances of me getting elected could be quite high. So I'm trying to sort of prepare for all options. But just off the back of what Erin said, I think she's absolutely right, and well done for doing what you're doing, because that's so nice to hear, and it's so reassuring to hear as well. I think for me, from my experience of since my son was born last May, things like CLP meetings have been quite scary. I've still been going because I've been the treasurer since like for a few years now, and there was no sort of maternity leave from that role, so I still had to sort of carry on doing that. Kept going to CLP meetings because you know, it's always been very important to me to be there, and we don't really have much help in terms of childcare locally. My parents are both retired, but they live 200 miles away, so it's not particularly helpful. So adjusting to that at a local level is quite scary. There's issues around timings of meetings aren't particularly helpful, locations of meetings aren't particularly helpful, things like that aren't thought about at that first initial stage. So I think we really need to look at, as a party, every stage of politics that we're sort of that we're organising. How can we make that each stage more accessible? You know, what can we do to try and encourage more people to get involved? Because for me, one of my campaign pledges was to try and encourage more women to get involved, and it's something I'm very passionate about. But I recognise that we've got to create those safe spaces for women and families, because there are a lot of fathers who want to, you know, play a strong role in raising their kids, which is fantastic. But we've got to think about how we be more family friendly, and how do we do that at every level and every stage. I have posted a few questions. I don't really want to go into all of them because I have asked quite a few. But thank you so much for all the different sort of answers and responses that we've had so far. I've really appreciated it. It's been really reassuring for me. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, and thank you and for your questions and your contributions, and congratulations on being elected and being a mom as well in politics. Ellie, CLPs, sometimes that can be a minefield.
Well, where to start with CLP meetings? First of all, Cllr, huge congratulations. I've seen some but not all of the chats. It's difficult to, I'm on my iPad because I had a bit of a laptop malfunction. I didn't have time to set it all up properly, so I'm on my iPad, so I've not seen all of the chat. But if you've got any specific questions, like, feel free to drop me a line as well if you wanted to, because I've seen you've put a few bits and pieces in there. I may have answered some of it whilst I've been speaking anyway. But you know, CLP meetings, I mean, the thing is that you're absolutely right to identify this, because actually, unless our structures are accessible throughout the party, we're not going to have women coming through and standing for Parliament. And also, one of the things that worries me a lot about not having women only shortlists anymore is that one of the reasons we needed them in the first place is because I think we'll have this idea of, you know, what makes a good MP, and largely it was the bloke that was turning up to every CLP meeting on a Friday night, you know, going to the pub afterwards with everyone, you know, serving on the council for 20-25 years or whatever. And actually introducing women only shortlists, I think, changed the sort of what MPs look like, because actually, you know, we now have got that 50-50 within the Labour Party, and that's really helped with I think changing the idea of what an MP should look like. My worry is it will go backwards at the next election, as we're set to do, if things carry on the way that they are. But we've got to have those structures that make it accessible for women. COVID was actually, I think, helpful in the sense that obviously it was terrible, but in terms of how we moved sort of online for things, because it meant that became much more normalised, that we'd have these online meetings. So rather than try to get everyone together in a room, you could do it online. I personally find my online CLP meetings far easier. We alternate. 1 month we have them online, 1 month we have them in person. When we have them online, put the kids to bed, I can dial in. You know, when they finish, I can have my dinner, because I've not really had a chance to have my dinner before I join them. But it's just so much easier on every level. Whereas if I would have to go to the meeting, you know, I don't get to put the kids to bed, so that's another night on top of the voting nights when I don't see them. You know, I'm home a lot later, and yeah, it is harder. So I do think there are some lessons that we can learn about making things more accessible, things around the timings of them, maybe the length of them as well. I don't know, I mean, every CLP is different, but mine seem to go on for a very, very, very long time. And I do wonder sometimes whether, you know, we should just be a bit stricter about how long that these meetings should actually go on for. Do you really need 2.5 hours, or could you get that done within an hour and a half, and just have that kind of discipline as well around the timings that we often don't seem to have? I think when we're juggling all different responsibilities, being a bit stricter about that, I think makes things more accessible. Our CLP kind of try to change the date of our meetings to sort of see whether they'd end up in more attendance, and we sort of briefly moved them to a Saturday afternoon at one point, which I really didn't like, because I sort of felt that really ate into family time. But then I think there are some other people with young children that like the Saturday afternoon model, so, you know, I guess not everything always works for everyone else, but certainly shorter, more focused meetings, online or hybrid, I think makes them more inclusive for women.
That's brilliant. And LWN really did campaign to keep the good stuff.
Yeah, I know. And it's not just for women, you know, also for like disabled people, in terms of not necessarily being able to get to meetings, people that might be caring for elderly relatives, people, you know, working long hours who are time poor, that don't have time to get to the meetings, that would quite happily join from online. So I think there's a whole range of reasons why they can end up being more inclusive.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think we're gonna, I mean, we're getting to the 10-2 mark, and I want to try and keep us so we can all go off and do what we need to do. I think we've got time for one more question, because I know Sarabjit's had a hand up for some time. So Sarabjit, do you want to just?
Yeah, sure. Hi, you know, it's really great to hear about the different provisions that are available once you become a councillor, or once you become an MP, which of course is a struggle in itself as a woman and as a BME person. But I just wanted to just raise the issue of, I mean, the struggle beforehand in terms of getting there, in terms of race and class, and how difficult it is for those women before actually getting there. And, because they can't, not all of them will have childcare or be able to afford childcare, and the whole education that they have to go through, and the work that is involved before actually getting to that career. And what, if anything, that we can push for, or what, if any, thoughts people had on that, or women had on that, that would be worth taking forward, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I talked about women only shortlists previously, and I think that did a huge amount to get more women into Parliament. That's why we've got our 50-50 in the Labour Party, and that really helped women in terms of being able to put themselves forwards and be selected to become members of Parliament. And I do think the fact that we can't use them anymore means that we will go backwards, and I'm desperately sad about all of that. One of the things that I campaigned for a long time when I was on the NEC, and that Labour Women's Network has also done a huge amount of work on and has led the way on, is things like how long selections last, because if selections last for a very, very, very long time, it is very hard with people with caring responsibilities to commit to an incredibly lengthy selection process, and things like spending caps as well for selection processes. I mean, I think that needs to be, my view is that also needs to be revisited now, because people seem to be spending a huge amount of money again on selections, and I don't want to be in a situation where people don't feel that they can put themselves forward, either because of the length of the selection process or the amount of money it will cost them, because that will not lead to having a diverse parliamentary Labour Party, or a parliamentary Labour Party that is reflective of the communities that we seek to represent.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. We think we can quickly push in the question from Caroline, if you keep it brief, sister.
Hi, yeah, I wrote it in the chat. I was going to ask, thanks for tonight, it's been great. If you had comments made about being a parent from other women in the party. Unfortunately, I have a negative comments such as, are you going to step down now that you're pregnant? And you know what you were getting into when you came into politics, so you shouldn't be able to go on mat leave because you're there to serve your residents. I'm a councillor, and we had a mat leave policy. This is obviously a safe space, please don't repeat this. We had a mat leave policy that was brought in 2 months after I returned, and I was the only person to have a baby in 5 years. And when my baby was 6 weeks old, it was the new municipal year, and my SRA was taken away, so my wage halved overnight. So I've had quite a poor experience, to be honest. You sort of ask, am I in the right party here? So I just wondered if you've had negative experiences and how you've coped with it, because I've felt obviously quite knocked by that. This was last year, and now I'm juggling being a councillor with a nearly 1 year old and a 7-year-old. I just need some hope really from people out there, and I'm wanting anyone who is a councillor. I really want to set up like a support group for councillors with young kids, so if you're interested in that, look me up.
Caroline, I'm really sorry to hear about the experiences that you've had. That sounds absolutely appalling. I haven't experienced those same issues from my local party, which I'm really grateful for. As I say, my eldest was 2 when I got elected, and my second was born right in the middle of the 2019 general election campaign. Literally, he was like three weeks old when we had on polling day. So it was terrible timing. I do remember having a bit of an argument about the count, and someone mentioned the count earlier. Erin, I think you talked about getting the time of your count changed, which really resonated with me. I ended up having a big argument about the count and whether I needed to be there, and my baby was 3 weeks old. I said, I just don't want to come to the count. You know, I've got a 3-week-old baby. I do not want to bring my baby, breastfeeding. Obviously didn't want to be away from the baby. Also didn't want the baby to be at the count because, you know, the sort of, you know, the like of these halls with the strip lighting. I mean, it just wasn't going to be the right place for him to be. And I got into a bit of a battle about whether I should be in the count. In the end, we compromised, and we decided that I would do a video. We tried to do a video link, it didn't quite work, so I said I'll just pre-record something. So I pre-recorded a sort of a speech that could then be played at the count, and that was sort of the compromise. And that was a bit of a battle that I sort of felt I didn't really need to have. I kind of thought, look, if I don't want to be at the count because I've got a 3-week-old baby, I'm not going to be at the count, and that should just be accepted rather than that be a kind of bit of a sort of sticking point. But look, I mean, Caroline, in terms of sort of giving you hope, I find that it isn't. It isn't always easy to juggle everything, but it is certainly doable. I love my job. I absolutely love my job. You know, it's I feel it's a privilege and an honour to be an elected representative for my local community. And although that does sometimes mean, you know, sort of juggling with childcare and the children, I do feel as though, you know, I can make time for them, that I have good relationships with the local party, with other colleagues, and that it is possible. So for everyone on the call this evening that is a candidate, that is thinking about putting themselves forward to be a candidate, whether for Parliament or for local government, I would say just go for it. Don't be put off by thinking there are too many barriers in the way. Get elected and break down those remaining barriers, and you will have the support of the sisters within the party that want to be part of that change with you.
And that's brilliant. Thanks, Ellie. And Caroline, from me, one of the things that I've learned in politics is that there are some people who are just professional analysts of other people's lives. So sometimes you just have to simply block out the noise. So that's one thing, you know, sometimes when people are coming at you, just have to try and block them out. The other one is I would just say that I found that actually going on a lot of courses, like with LWN in terms of the Joe Cox programs, things that I've done with the LGA, it's meant that I've built up my network of sisters around the country. So there was a lot more people that I had that solidarity with, and you can ask questions and gain advice from. And also, if there's specific things where, you know, we could do with some form of policy coming in place or something standardised across the piece, then I'd send something into LGA's task force, women's task force, to see if they can provide any advice or if there's something that we can look at there. But also, you're not alone, and you have to, you know, just keep on going. I know it's difficult, but you definitely need to keep on going. You was elected for a reason, and you are good enough to be in the space and own it. Okay then, great stuff. Well, haven't we had some debate tonight, sisters? I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Ellie. And I guess some of the takeaways from me has been, we need to set some boundaries, sisters. That's what we definitely need to do. We need to set boundaries. We need to make sure that we're shaping our political lives that fit in well with our lives that we've got at home. Having children and being parents is not a barrier. In fact, it brings a lot of strength to the Labour Party, to society, and will help us to shape a lot of policy moving forward. And just from what we can see in this virtual room here, that there's a lot of solidarity out there. So we need to make sure we keep our networks up and keep the good stuff. And that's why Labour Women's Network will continue to do things online so that we can have these nice safe spaces. And for those of us that are not in Parliament, we need to help people like Ellie in their constituencies, but also to continue to lobby for the proxy vote to be lengthened, please, so that when some of us on this screen do get there, it's a lot easier for us, and it also supports sisters like Ellie that are already in there We have come a long way, but there's still some work to do. And with a network of sisters and a sisterhood like this, I'm sure we can manage to do that. So I'm going to say, Ellie, thank you so much. It's been a joy speaking to you. I've really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it too. I started by saying, you know, I always looking forward to this event, and it's been wonderful. Been great to be in the company of so many brilliant women. So thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to our fantastic Cllr.
Oh, thank you, sisters. Thank you both so much for the time and warmth and relatability and honesty that you've brought to tonight's discussion. Thank you too to our fantastic audience for all of your contributions in the chat. I sort of personally feel like we could talk about this issue for about a week and we'd still just be scratching the surface. So I think the suggestion from Caroline that maybe we not run but support the setting up of a kind of private place where people experiencing these issues at the coalface can chat is a really good one. So I don't know, Caroline, maybe if you wanted to lead on setting up a private Facebook group for councillors with kids, probably Labour councillors with kids, we'd be very happy to advertise that link round to people so people can carry on the conversation and be there to support one another. And those times when the negativity does hit in, and I've experienced it too, and I just want to say a great big solidarity and sisterhood to you, and it does get better. And for every tool who says something stupid, there's a whole bunch of people out there who are feeling the support and feeling the solidarity. So try not to be disheartened by it, because I think we are moving in the right direction and we're seeing heaps of progress and we are seeing cultural change. So hopefully we are on the road to a better, more inclusive place. If you have enjoyed tonight and you want to come along to another Labour Women's Network event, we will be back next Tuesday when Alison McGovern MP, Nan Sloan and Kieran Mayhill will be leading a conversation to celebrate the centenary of the first ever 3 women elected as Labour MPs, some of whom did have children. So that would be a really interesting opportunity to put those slightly forgotten sisters, Margaret, Dorothy and Susan, back into the history books. And we also have a number of parliamentary selection workshops coming up, again via Zoom, so you can join us from wherever, including with kids in the background, monthly over the next few months. So if you are thinking of standing selection, you want to understand the process week by week, we will happily walk you through it and answer all your questions. If you are not yet a member of Labour Women's Network, we would love for you to join us, because every single member helps amplify our roar. Equally, if you can follow us on social media, the odd retweet goes a long way in making sure there is a feminist presence felt within the Labour movement. But mostly, be sisterly to each other, be kind to yourselves, take care of yourselves, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. And good night.